Center for the Study of Music, Media, and Place here at Memorial University. I'm delighted to welcome everyone tonight to the MMaP Gallery for this important event, the book launch for Kearney Guigné's new book entitled Forgotten Songs of Newfoundland Outports, as taken from Kenneth Peacock's 1951 to 1961 Newfoundland Field Collection. From representatives from the book's press and faculty at Memorial to traditional singers, a wide variety of presenters have come here this evening to celebrate the release of this important study. After the talk and songs, Dr. Guigné will be available to sign copies of the book, and refreshments will be served. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. John Willis. Dr. Willis is the editor of the noted Mercury book series from the Canadian Museum of History, and he's also the museum's curator for economic history. He will speak on behalf of the museum and talk about the series and the significance of Guigné's project. Let's welcome Dr. Willis.
Hello everyone, I'll try to be brief, but that's very difficult for a historian. So you will excuse me. I just want to say it's a delight to be here in St. John's, in a place bathed in song and melodies that ricochet off the rocks and through the people that climb up and down the rocks, putting into this bay, then another, notwithstanding the fogs, the giant ice cubes, and the lovely weather. In Forgotten Songs of the Newfoundland Outports, Guigné has produced a fine book for which the words and melody literally leap off the page, and thanks to the magic of digitized content, into the e-version of the book. We are so proud to see the musical heritage of Newfoundland conserved in the archives of the Canadian Museum of History make such a fabulous comeback in this 21st century. We have here assembled about 128 songs under 116 titles, you can correct me now, collected for the National Museum of Man, our museum's ancestor, by Kenneth Peacock during the 1950s. The material in Anne's book was never published by Peacock, so we are in uncharted territory. There are songs from Newfoundland and songs from away, folk mixing it in with vaudeville, country, and western, all part of the Outport musical scene. I would surmise that the repertoire could not fail to be other than composite. On the one hand, you've got your traditional roots, however defined, and on the other you have radio, which, circa the 1950s, a lot of people were listening to. Radio which brought in all kinds of melodies and musical influences. And it's in radio that Joey Smallwood, another Newfoundland performer, got his start. Some months ago at the University of Ottawa, as the University of Ottawa Press began work on producing the manuscript, I asked Anna if she had a few favorite songs. Among the titles she gave me was The Dance at Daniels Harbour, describing a community located on the Great Northern Peninsula. So here is an excerpt from the song. We weighed up our bound to Daniels Harbour on the 7th of June. Our boat she worked well to the end of the barn. Our engine gave out and Fred broke the forearm. We got to Daniels Harbour, 'twas just before dark. We all went on shore, boys, I can tell you we looked smart. Went straight to John Sampson's, got a bench right away, and then got the fiddler and Rufus to play. We danced there that night till 11 o'clock, and some of the couples went out for a walk. 'Twas out on the beach where they did sit down until Austin and Betty came jogging around. So now to conclude and finish my song, I have no composers or said nothing wrong. We'll come back again if the weather proved fine, and I think on the cuff there's no more on my mind. At Daniels Harbour, song and dance go together like hand and glove, and there's all kind of communication going on as well. The Book of Outport Songs is part of a wider field of study, ethnomusicology, in which our museum has been actively engaged for decades. The roots of that interest stretch back to Sheldon Posen, a graduate of Memorial University nearby, with a marvelous voice. Lucien Ouellet, a student of French-Canadian song, Carmel Bégin, who worked on two fabulous exhibits, Opus, and the other was Resonance. Finally, way back when, a certain Marius Barbeau started collecting songs on beeswax cylinders. Barbeau spent almost 40 years with the museum, beginning in 1911. We still have the cylinders. My colleague, Judith Klassen, who sends warm greetings, is our current ethnomusicologist. She has been active in ongoing efforts to digitize and make meaningfully available the important archival sound recordings that are part of the AV archives at CMH. Anna's book project is, of course, Judith adds, a beautiful example of what's possible. Judith is currently working on an anthology with 2 other scholars, for which the working title is Contemporary Musical Expressions and Cultural Resonances in Canada. Judith is hard at work on a display on the history of popular music in Canada from the 1960s to the 1980s, which will open at CMH, our museum, in November of 2018, come hell or high water. I have a few words from La Ville on behalf of the team at the University of Ottawa Press. They are delighted to be with you all in spirit to celebrate the release of Anna's book, Forgotten Songs. Anna, Lara writes, is passionate about her subject, was keen on producing an outstanding book, an amazing storyteller, and she replies to emails. She is a wonderful scholar as well as an amazing woman. The entire University of Ottawa Press team congratulates Anna on this day. If you all raise your glass to Anna, we will simultaneously do a little folk stippet from our offices in Ottawa as we listen to Newfoundland folk songs. A brief reminder, the Mercury series in which this book appears is a partnership between the University of Ottawa Press and the Canadian Museum of History. All 501 titles of the Mercury backlist, covering history, archaeology, ethnology, and cultural studies, are available on CD, on DVD, in the e-version. So, without any further ado, I simply wish to congratulate Anna on her wonderful achievement, and I wish loads of luck to the book. Thank you.
Thank you for those wonderful remarks. Our next speaker needs little introduction. Well known to many in this room, Dr. Philip Hiscock has been a faculty member in the Department of Folklore here at Memorial University for many years, and is a prominent member both of the St. John's community and the wider world of Newfoundland folklore scholarship. Dr. Hiscock will talk about the meaning that these songs have for the province and for the study of folklore.
Thanks, Harry. I don't know how much I'll talk about the media it has, but we'll see. I could go on talking a lot more than I'm allowed to here, and so you'll have to forgive me that I sort of gave myself some guardrails here to hold myself in. I'm actually very, very pleased to have anything to say publicly about this book. I've known Anna for a long time. We were undergraduate students together. I won't say exactly how long, but I'm a little older than Anna, so I was well, she didn't flunk out, I did. So we ended up being in sync. So I don't know if we ever took courses together, but we knew each other around the cat. And I don't think that at that time, 40 odd years ago, we ever talked very much about our shared interest in Newfoundland agriculture. But she, at that time, was a folk singer. She was very much involved in that stuff. So her roots in this stuff go back quite a bit further, certainly than mine. Although I was interested in Newfoundland agriculture, I came to folklore much later. As did she in the folklore department, and I've watched her work in this area grow over all that time. When she came as a graduate student to folklore, she actually did one project first, but for her PhD thesis, she took on the project that really this is one of the fruits of. It was a topic to most of us who knew the Peacock collection thought of as fraught with contest, academic contest. But that's what makes scholarship really interesting often, the contest. So that Peacock's collection at that time was one of 3 or 4 good collections of Newfoundland folk songs that were available. So he published it in 1965. It was very, very big. And most of these were songs that were really to the kind of people that I knew, anyway, townies, for the most part, were totally unknown. We grew up with what Neil Rosenberg has called the canon of Newfoundland folk song, which largely circulated around the 2 or 3 sources of popular songs at the time, the Dua songbooks, perhaps the Blondell records, and so on. These were all new to us. So we both knew many of the towny folk singers and trad bands in the 1970s who went out and really mined the ground that was Peacock's for songs, for new old songs that weren't part of that canon. Some of those trad singers went a little further and learned the names of the people who sang those songs for Peacock. And the most energetic of them actually went out and tried to track down those people's families. And in some cases actually found the same people that Peacock had taped or taken notes from. And then they were able then to kind of refresh the stock of the available songs for my generation of listeners to that kind of music. Anna did that, in fact. I don't think she'd ever say that she did this a whole lot, but she certainly did. Before she came to folklore as a study, she was working in the national park, also a national park, and struck out and tracked down one of those families of storytellers and singers, the Bennetts, one of the people whose work show up here. And I think that probably sharpened her interest and her appetite for more folklore work. And a few years later then, of course, she did turn to this large project that she's worked on. That project, of course, turned into a big PhD, a successful PhD thesis, which in turn was kind of parlayed into an important book on Peacock's place in that whole dynamic world at the middle of the 20th century of people's knowledge of song, the role of popular song, the role of political opinions of that sort of stuff. And so that book, I think, really kind of established her as an important writer in that area. And that was 2008, so that's 8 years ago. It's 2016 now. She's brought out this beautiful, big. How many of you have picked it up? Like hefted it. Yeah, I mean it's a heavy book. It's dense. That's right. She's gone back to in fact, to the very songs, not so much that Peacock popularized, although there is overlap here in the song types here, but in fact songs that he ignored for whatever reasons. Some of the reasons she touches on there, and at the same time she provides, I think, much closer texts and tunes to what he actually recorded. So with Evelyn Osborne, who of course checked all his transcriptions and edited them and corrected them where necessary, and when necessary annotated new musical notations. That's not ambiguous or not redundant. The two of them have brought together then this whole new view of the Peacock collection. I said that Anna's PhD topic had scholarly contest. Of course, had nothing to do with her, but it had a lot to do with Peacock. In the 20 years or whatever it is, how long have you been working on Peacock?
Since 1994.
Yes, 22 years. In those 22 years, she's really narrowed the gap, I think, between the two sides of that contest, and folklore studies has changed a lot. That contest existed because Peacock was primarily a musician and a composer. Anna and I have had this conversation several times. I think we have different understandings of that. I'm sure she's more correct than I am. But I certainly see him as having had a day job. And that day job was to collect songs for the museum. And like any artist, and he was an artist, he was a musician and a composer, the art haunted his day job. And so he had two different senses of what it was he was doing. He carried on with those double senses, and he wanted to produce with the book, of course, many of you know, it was heavier than this, because it was 3 books, 1,000 pages, bound into 3 volumes. He wanted to produce a published set of songs that not only reflected the tradition as he saw it in the middle of the 20th century, but was also acceptable to contemporary people who might want to sing and revive and carry on the tradition of singing these songs. And of course, he was successful. Thus, all the trad bands and folk singers in St. John's who did so well by his work. On the other hand, though, folklorists in the 20th century, and still today, 21st century, felt that the oral tradition was a little more difficult to move around with that. In some sense, it was sacrosanct. And folklorists, again, still today, hated when people publish anything that purports to be folklore, which is not precisely as the person heard it. If they've changed it, then we get our noses up in the air and they've changed it. So when folklorists listened to Peacock's original tapes, which were available when I went to work in the Folklore Archive in 1979, early 79, I don't think we received them about 85, Neil, yeah. And we started listening, I started listening to them, perhaps you'd heard some of them before. And we were kind of shocked that there were so many variations between the original recording and what he transcribed on the page and published. So this was a deep disappointment for us. And it was in the cloud of that disappointment, really, that Anna, 10 years later, started working on that material. I think today we all folklorists have a much more nuanced understanding of the hand of any scholar, including their own hand. And Anna has really kind of opened up our understanding of Peacock in so many ways that, as I say, that contest is no longer a contest. It's just kind of interesting facts that are there. It's not too strong a word. I think one of the things that Anna Guigné did for Peacock is to vindicate him. And she's a kind of a reviser of that bit of history. I've had my copy longer than most of you seen it. I've had it for 24 hours. And so, I've gone through it a bit. And it's still very new to me, of course. In 24 hours, no one can get through everything that's in this book. It's so full. I want to tell you, it's not just a supplement to the original edition, the 1965 edition. It's not just a publication of the unpublished materials that were included in the original National Museum publication. It's an important work in its own right. And it's work, as I say, about Peacock, to begin with. Peacock, the great collector of Newfoundland songs, about his work in Newfoundland, and about the effect that his work had. And thus it's about the song traditions of the 20th century Newfoundland. It's, again, a different point. It's a great addition to the corpus of vernacular song in this province. The poem that the song of John read out, I think, is a nice example. Most of us have never seen that before, and so it's a good one. It links to the mention of Rufus. Most of us probably said, "Is that Rufus Ginscher he's talking about?" Or she's talking about it later. So it tells us lots about that and gives us new songs. In fact, beyond that, one of the things that we folklorists love in looking at song, folklorists of my sort anyway, love when looking at song collections, is to look at the annotations, the notes on those songs. What's this like? Who else published something like this? Who's recorded this? Who took this version and ran with it? And all those sorts of things. Well, this, in fact, has the very best annotations I've seen for Newfoundland songs in a collection like this. This is just incredibly well done. That tells us about not just the songs, it tells us about the prehistory, as it were, the history of the songs. It links to Britain, to the Boston States, or wherever, other parts of Canada, other parts of Newfoundland Labrador. It tells us about the history of those songs, but it also tells us, because of the kind of annotation that she's done, about the, what's the opposite of history? Not the future, the pluperfect. The history since he collected it. Who has recorded this since then? Which something he could never have done. But Anna was well placed to do those things. So we see that so-and-so recorded a version of this in 2012 or something. Thus it's about song in the English-speaking world in the 19th, 20th, and now the 21st centuries. So it's all this. And then I think one of my favorite parts of the book as well is the writing is small, the lines are packed together. It's only about 20 pages long, but it's got a lot there. It's the section near the end of the biographical sketches of the singers, which is just these lovely snapshots of these people's lives, not just as singers, but as human beings, as interconnected human beings. So this is the fruits of Anna's 2 decades of poking around and doing interviews and chasing families and asking questions and taking good notes on all of that. So excellent stuff. I really like it. In fact, I don't want to draw too many comparisons here, but I was reminded of Herbert Halpert and John Widdowson's big 2-volume book of folk tales of Newfoundland, which came out at the end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s. And what was it? No, it was already in the 90s. But it was really one of the great works of folkloristic contextualism, if you don't mind me saying that. It rooted the materials in the lives of those people. Well, her lovely little vignettes about these people do some of that. Anyway, Anna told me to talk for 4 or 5 minutes. Well, I said I'd probably talk for 4 or 5 minutes. She said, that's perfect. So I think I've gone beyond that. I think all of you will find the book not just useful and informative, but also lively and engaging. It's a lovely book. And I'm really in awe of this book. I really thank you, Anna, for this. And I should say, I want to thank the revitalized Mercury series people for taking this on, and of course the University of Ottawa for taking it on. It is a dense book. It must have been very, very difficult in 2016 to publish such an elegant and thick in all senses book. And you're to be congratulated on taking that on. In these days of this post-book era, I think it's just wonderful. So with that, that's really all I have to say. I might say though that Fergus, in particular, being the age that he is, which is about my age, Fergus, when he came here, I think, probably was one of the people who picked through the original Peacock collection, and so I think for people, for all musicians, Ellen too, who's Ellen? Oh, there, who also will be singing. I expect she'll find this a wonderful resource. So with that, thank you again, Anna.
Thank you, John.
Our next presenter is another person who will need little introduction in this room, or indeed in any room in the North Atlantic where folk music is played. As a founding member of Ryan's Fancy, a performer in the group Tickle Harbor, or a solo artist, Fergus O'Byrne has won many awards and served a pivotal role in the institutions of traditional music throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. Tonight he will perform 2 pieces for us, one from Kenneth Peacock's original study, Songs for the Newfoundland Outports, and one from Guigné's new book.
Hope you don't mind the banjo. I'm going to play it anyway, just hope you don't mind it. When Anna asked me to do this, she sent me 3 three songs from the collection, and these three of the songs were songs that Ryan Stancy had actually recorded different versions of them. Did I do that? Ryan Stancy had recorded different versions, obviously, from this collection. And one of the songs, the song I'm going to sing is a song called The Boston Burglar. And the Boston Burglar, when I was growing up in Ireland, I grew up in the 60s in Dublin, and that was at the time of the great folk revival. And of course, the Boston Burglar was one of the big hits of the time. You know, it was a time when folk music and folk songs would become number one on the hit parade. And so this Boston Burglar had been recorded many times around Ireland. And then Dermot found it, and he recorded, and we eventually recorded with the band Ryan Stancy. But I was interested to see the different version that Amelia Kinslow from Isle Mort sings. The melody is different. I don't know if you remember the original Boston, I won't say the original Boston Burglar, but the melody that came from, I'm not sure where Dermot got it, or where the Boston Burglar came from, in Dublin. Because it's obviously an American folk song. But anyway, this is Amelia's version of it. Where I was born in Boston, the city you all know well, brought up by honest parents, the truth to you I'll tell. Brought up by honest parents and read most tender
Thank you so much for those wonderful, wonderful songs. I'm delighted now to introduce our author this evening. Dr. Anna Kearney Guigné is a scholar who has published widely on the music of Newfoundland and Labrador. Indeed, few students of the tradition have the depth of insight and knowledge that Guigné does into the social worlds of music making in this complex and diverse province. The topics she's examined are varied, including 20th century folklore collectors, the dynamics of music revivals, symbolism in traditional cultures, and the politics of public sector folklore. In 2004, Guigné was awarded the PhD with distinction from the folklore department here at Memorial, with a dissertation supervised by Peter Narvaez. Since that time, she's held appointments here at Memorial, served as artistic director of the North Atlantic Fiddle Convention, and received honors, awards, and grants from many organizations, including the Newfoundland Folk Arts Council. Her work has appeared in well-known venues such as Newfoundland and Labrador Studies, Ethnologies, Canadian Journal for Traditional Music, Contemporary Legend, Lore and Language, and Culture and Tradition. I know that all of you hold her work in as high esteem as I do. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to you this evening, Dr. Anna Kearney Guigné.
Thank you very much, all of you. I'm absolutely, totally touched with the turnout this evening for the Forgotten Songs, and everybody says it's a little like giving birth, and it really, really is. I want to say a bunch of thanks, actually, before I talk a little bit about the book. I want to say thanks to the Canadian Museum of History for supporting my endeavors to bring out this important aspect of Kenneth Peacock's 1951-1961 field collection. And this includes Dr. Judith Clasham, the curator of cultural expression, Dr. Matthew Betts, the former editor of the museum's Mercury series, Dr. John Willis, the current editor, who's taken the time to come down here to be with us, circumventing snowstorms, I might add. Also, Bill Carmen, who has been my go-to person over the past few months. And this has really, for me, been an incredibly exciting and fantastic collaboration all around. I want to thank Reginald Windsor and the Newfoundland and Labrador Arts Council for the grant I received in 2010, because it was really strategic to enable me to bring this project to fruition. The support of the NLAC went a long way to levering other support in the community. I actually didn't get any other grants except the one, a second one, which I'll explain now. So I didn't go after shirt grants. I don't know, I just kind of went across the backyard to my little office and kind of worked away. And so that grant brought me a lot of mileage. And when I applied for the grant, I said it was only going to take 6 months. That was in 2010. I'd also like to acknowledge the tremendous support of Dr. Beverly Diamond. I don't know if Beverly's here this evening, but at the time she was the director of the Research Center for Music, Media and Place, and in addition to offering her letter of support for the NLAC grant, she also facilitated 2 graduate grants that enabled me to hire a graduate student, now Dr. Evelyn Osborne, to assist with the retranscribing and re-editing of Peacock's transcripts for this publication. So thanks as well to Evelyn, who is now in Hong Kong teaching, because of her tremendous part played in transcribing and re-editing the songs. There are at least 2 songs that she had to re-edit, she had to actually transcribe from scratch. And long after the graduate funding ran out, Evelyn actually hung in there and continued to work with me. Manuscript, no matter how final you think it is, it's just that. It's a manuscript until the publishers take over and give it the polish and shine. And in this regard, I'm truly grateful to Lara Maynard, who's the director of the University of Ottawa Press, and to the production editor, Elizabeth Schwager, and the rest of the team at the University of Ottawa Press, who collaborated with the Canadian Museum of History to produce this publication under the Mercury series. I want to thank Philip, because every time I run into trouble or I have a question, I go to Philip. and this has applied right across the board because of his vast knowledge of Newfoundland song and history and linguistics. And he's always answered my questions, and in his true fashion, in a most engaging manner. Similarly, Joan Ritzy, who's here this evening, and Pauline Cox, Joan with the Center for Newfoundland Studies, and Pauline Cox, who's the archivist at Memorial's Folklore and Language Archive. They reached out to me in so many ways. If I wanted material, they somehow got it to me. And at one point, Pauline actually took I was looking for a piece of music pertaining to the Newfoundland expression. She says, well, she says, I can play it to you over the telephone. And she actually did. So there's many, many thanks. I also want to say a very special thanks to Dr. Harris Berger, who's the new director of the Research Center for Music, Media and Place, and to Dr. Megan Forsyth, the center's project coordinator and researcher, for their kindness in helping me to launch the Forgotten Songs this evening. As many of you are aware, since its inception in 2003, many positive musical events and products and research projects have unfolded in the community through the initiatives taken by MMaP. And one of the center's goals is to focus on celebrating the rich musical tradition of Newfoundland and Labrador through research and through collaboration with the community. And over the years, I have personally benefited from this model through such collaborative projects as the 2008 Fiddle Convention and the ICTM Maud Karpelis exhibit. So I'm especially delighted to launch the Forgotten Songs from this really nurturing space. Fergus and Ellen, I am so grateful to both of you for being able to come here this evening and to sing these songs and to give them life with your incredible voices. You have not heard Ellen sing yet. She's magnificent. And comes highly recommended, I might add. When I was looking for somebody female to sing the songs, I kept saying, Ellen, I've got to get Ellen. And of course, Fergus, not only has he sung for us this evening, I have also contacted Fergus on a number of songs, and he's been able to contribute his wealth of knowledge. And it was really exciting for me this evening to hear the Boston Burglar. You got the melody. I have been listening to these field tapes forever and ever and ever, and the melodies are embedded in here, and he has captured Amelia Kinslow's swing, her voice. It's amazing. Finally, before I actually talk about the book itself, I want to express my gratefulness to my family, who have lovingly lived with Kenneth Peacock for a good many years. And here I personally want to thank my husband, Jean, for quelling my nerves, pushing me onward, and simply being there by my side. So, the background to this publication. Between 1951 and 1961, on behalf of the National Museum of Canada, which is today the Canadian Museum of History, this young musician by the name of Kenneth Peacock took on the task of documenting the song tradition of Canada's newest project. And after 6 seasons of diligently gathering and transcribing 766 songs and melodies, he would eventually publish the bulk of this material in Songs of the Newfoundland Outports in 1965. And as Phil was alluded to, it was certainly a very influential publication for those of us that were singing songs. And up to the time when I discovered the Outports, the Peacock collection, actually from Deborah Kodish, who was a folklore student, I had only been familiar with the Gerald S. Doyle songs. Looking back, we can appreciate that with such a large collection, Peacock had to make choices. And his collecting and publishing activities also have to be seen from within the framework of the emerging Canadian folk revival, which underpinned his work. In fact, this work took place alongside that of such key figures as the National Museum's Marius Barbeau, Edith Folk, Helen Creighton, Alan Mills, Tom Himes, and Sam Gesser, to name a few. These folks actually shaped the 1950s and 60s Canadian folk revival in all kinds of ways. So during this period, along with this emergent folk song scholarship, for Peacock at least, songs had to have good tunes and they had to be singable. He also had his preferences. He didn't like country and western music. He had an aversion to religious material. He didn't like the Mother McRae Irish material that had been so popular in his own household growing up. In some cases, he eliminated songs from Outports simply because the material was too esoteric or the singer's delivery was confusing and or too fragmented for him to make sense of the content. We also have to appreciate that in this period, Peacock was working with newly invented recording machines, and they had their own quirks. It didn't have the advantage of today's technology, including programs such as Amazing Slowdowner or the Sibelius music software. Incredibly, for almost every single item Peacock collected, he also created musical and textual transcripts, all by hand. So we are fortunate that because Peacock worked for the Canadian National Museum, his entire collection has been preserved in the museum's archives. And Munfla also has a copy of the bulk of the sound recordings. They don't have the texts, but we can work on that. So this allowed me as a graduate student to go back in time to see what more could be learned about the material Peacock accumulated over his 6 trips, and about the singers themselves. In fact, I kind of walked at the time, and Dr. Neil Rosenberg was my supervisor, and I walked into Neil's house, into his office, and I said, "I'd like to do something on the Peacock collection." He says, "That's a good idea. Glad you came up with it." So I then walked over to Philip Hiscock, who was at the archives, and I had discovered a letter from Julia Bishop, who had written, she was doing work on the Moonshine song, the other big thesis in the folklore department. And I discovered Peacock's address, and so I commenced this conversation with Peacock. I actually started with his inventory of the songs and started comparing the inventory to what was actually in the publication, and discovered that there were these huge gaps. And I also had the opportunity to talk with Peacock, and so began my exchanges and the beginnings of my research. So along the way, in July of 1997, I had been working my way through this collection in an attempt to reconcile what Peacock published with what he actually collected in Newfoundland, and somewhere in the midst of listening to the 1958 sessions from the Bennett family of St. Paul's, and there's I don't know, hours and hours and hours of this material. After singing the song Eliza Gray, Everett Bennett performed the song Goodbye John, but don't stop long. And the chorus of that is, "Oh, it's goodbye John, but don't stop long. Son, come back to your old chickabiddy, for may heart beat slow, and the winds do blow that takes away my sailor." And at the end, there was a recitation. Oh, well, this is so different from any of the other material Peacock has actually collected, and it certainly doesn't fall in that commodity category, and I didn't know what to think about it. As I discovered through this process of reconciliation, Peacock's perceived notion of a traditional folk song were very specific, and certainly did not include an 1860s British music hall song, no matter how humorous it was to the audience. That song also broadened out my perceptions of the nature of traditional song in a place such as this province, which is supposedly somewhat isolated. As I also discovered through Peacock's 1951 and 61 field collection, there were a number of songs that highlight the eclectic and diverse nature of the Newfoundland song tradition. The unpublished collection, most of which now appears in Forgotten Songs, includes popular 19th century parlor songs, British and American music hall songs, country and western numbers, the occasional blackface number, murder songs, songs of war, sentimental songs, and all of that alongside this incredibly collection of really esoteric, locally composed songs. But when you start to unpack what's happening, there's a great story behind it. In fact, all of these songs, perhaps that's why it took me so long, all of these songs have great stories. And for me, the collection is really a gateway for looking at the availability of song material in the province by way of sources such as songsters and broadsides, newspapers, radio programs, vinyl recordings, and so forth, which we now know were imported into Newfoundland and Labrador. In the case of songsters, for example, the dates can easily be pushed back to the 1850s, but more likely before this period. While songs were undoubtedly shared between singers and in such contacts as lumber camps, more often than not, singers also turned to any and all sources to acquire material. And this comes out in the field recordings and in the material that I was using to annotate my collections. You, for example, turn to the Your Favorites song column of the Newfoundlander, and if a song had any appeal and singers wanted it and they would actually, in a format like that, request the song. And this is the case for songs like Loss of the Caribou and The Rose of June, which is a great Scottish song about a shipwreck that is no longer in existence in Newfoundland, in Scotland, but it's here because I think the Newfoundlanders going off to Scotland to help with the lumbering industry brought the song back, and they liked it, and so consequently we had these great recordings of it. So what is this book all about? Well, to me, it's really not a songbook as much as it's a collection. It's about the song collection and what we can learn from that material in terms of the richness of the Newfoundland and Labrador tradition, and to some extent about singing practices. Oftentimes, people would make there were not a whole lot of comments on the field recordings that Peacock made because he saved the tape space for the songs. But occasionally, you'd hear a comment like, "That's sung good," or "Now, old Mr. So-and-so, he learned that song when he was over in England." And that's like to me, that's a little piece of information that's great. It's also a way of reconciling what Peacock collected with what he actually published. In some cases, such as Kenneth Pink's performance of Nancy of London, Peacock only published one stanza. Well, this new collection includes all of the stanzas. And the Canadian Museum of History has also, by the way, put up 26 field recordings of the original field recordings pertaining to this collection. And Kenneth Pink's Nancy of London is there, and you have to listen to it. He is just, his swing, the way he sings this is amazing. So today we have the pleasure of both seeing and hearing the entire song. This collection includes field examples of songs that just basically have appeared in Newfoundland only in field collections. And so the printing of this collection, in effect, closes some of that gap. And the kinds of collections that I were using, from Munfla, Kenneth Goldstein's massive collection of about 3,000 recordings, it's just staggering. The early Munfla collections where students were sent out to their communities to document the song traditions that they had, and I was able to use the song title index. Neil, you initiated that song title index. That's great. And it's valuable. It's up on the web right now. And for me, coming at this so many years later, this is something that's been particularly special about this publication, is that I've been able to draw on the multiple resources that are out there today by way of the World Wide Web and to be able to access materials that Peacock couldn't possibly have access in the time that he was doing this research. So this basically brings something in terms of my own approach to annotation. Peacock was an excellent collector, but he felt that people were more suited to the business annotation than he was. I think he greatly admired people like Edith Folk, for example, in that domain. Well, I feel I've been able to compensate at least a little bit through my own efforts to contextualize these songs, particularly in the case of the locally composed material, as well as through my efforts to link the material to other resources and examples. In particular, the inclusion of the round numbers at the beginning of each song will enable readers to tap into the vast reservoir of material contained in the Round Folk Song and Broadside indexes hosted at the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library website. Additionally, Steve Rout, who I am eternally grateful to, Steve, I would come across a song one about Baxter Ware, the song about the Mickey Milligan's pug, a comic ditty. And Steve had a copy of that material in his songster collection, and he would fax it off, or he would scan it off, and he would send it to me time and time and time again. So this enabled me to be able to incorporate that kind of information into these annotations. So what it was basically doing was saying, we sort of know that that material is out there. It turns it around and it says, no, that material is out there. Likewise, for some of the songsters, we sort of know that the Wayman songsters were here. Well, I was able, through the Digital Archive Initiative, to Google in 617 Irish songs, and there it is. It pops up, and there's the date, and it proves that that songster was here in Newfoundland, and that, lo and behold, singers were able to avail of that material. So what I've been trying to do is to pin down the existence of certain material. the existence of parlor songs that were performed in the outports and concerts. And so anyway, through the route numbers and through Steve's routes help, Forgotten Songs, I hope, offers links to other song resources at several levels, starting with the Newfoundland connections and then working outward to the Canadian collections. I've gone into Helen Creighton's unpublished material, going to the American material and the British material, and thankfully for the World Wide Web. So now, as we officially launched Forgotten Songs of the Newfoundland Outports into the world of folk singers and folk song and folk music scholarship, I'm certain Kenneth Peacock would have been pleased to at least see this last part of his collection made available in such a manner by the Canadian Museum of History in conjunction with the University of Ottawa. And this is truly a celebration of his work, and I'm most grateful for the opportunity to bring it all together, enhanced with the new knowledge and details that were not available to him so many years ago. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to end with the happier ending, though I guess it's not quite a happier ending because it's happy for the guy because he stays with his girlfriend that he likes, but for the new missus who likes him, it doesn't end well. But nobody dies, so for Newfoundland, that's a good ending. So this is The Jacket So Blue. A ship's crew of sailors, as you may understand, from New York to Liverpool, with a cargo to land. There's one lad among
much for those beautiful songs. I would like to thank all of you for coming out to tonight's event this evening. Dr. Guigné will now sign copies of her new book, and refreshments will be served. In addition, we'll be showing excerpts from a silent film footage that Kenneth Peacock shot in the late 1950s. It's a fitting accompaniment to tonight's festivities. Thank you all for coming.